Hello, my friend. Wherever you are in the world listening to this story, if you've ever felt judged by your appearance or witnessed someone being treated unfairly simply because they didn't fit in, then tonight's story about a rainy evening, an almost empty restaurant, and a man who seemed like no one important may speak directly to your heart. Take a moment. Sit back. Let me tell you what happened. In a quiet southern coastal town where golden sunshine and salty breezes have graced thousands of tourist postcards, there is a restaurant called Orem. The name means pure gold, and true to its name, Orem has long been considered the town's crown jewel, a place where guests are treated like royalty, perched atop a cliff with an open view of the vast ocean. Orem looks like a timeless villa wrapped in modern elegance. Tall glass windows stretch open to endless blue skies and sea, and when the afternoon sun dips low, its golden light bathes the entire dining room in a honeyed glow. Inside, everything speaks of quiet sophistication: polished walnut tables, French crystal chandeliers dangling from vaulted ceilings, and stone-tiled walkways, so pristine you'd hesitate to leave a single footprint. But that was on a sunny day. Today was different. Today brought wind and rain, relentless cold and steady. Outside, winter showers didn't fall like a storm. They dropped slowly in heavy icy beads. Waterlogged leaves clung to the street. The ocean beyond had turned nearly black, growling against the shore as if protesting the weather itself. Inside Orem, once alive with laughter, clinking glasses, and whispered toasts, the silence was unsettling. The warm golden lights still glowed. The soft jazz melodies still hummed through the overhead speakers. But it felt like the music played only for itself, with no audience left to admire it. At the reception desk, only 3 servers remained, along with a duty chef in the kitchen. The rest had been sent home early. There were no reservations tonight. Even table 7, usually booked by the mayor, every Saturday had canceled. Among the staff was Lana, who was 23 years old. She had only been working at Orem for 2 months, but was already appreciated for her quickness, courtesy, and warm smile, something that made even first-time guests feel at ease. Still, there were things Lana hadn't quite unlearned. She had a quiet habit of observing guests, and without realizing it, judging whether they belonged there. It wasn't personal. It was instinct, shaped by the luxury all around her. No one ever said it aloud, but it was understood. The man in an Armani suit and Swiss watch always got his water first. The one in sandals, unsure how to pronounce French dishes, he'd get just enough service. Lana didn't think of herself as unkind, just practical. After all, in a place like Orem, there had to be standards, right? It was nearly 900 p.m. The rain hadn't let up. The team was preparing to close when suddenly the glass door creaked open. The soft tinkle of wind chimes stirred above the entrance like a subtle signal that something was about to change. A man in his 50s walked in. He was soaked. His thick charcoal coat clung to him, darkened by rain. His wool cap dripped water onto the stone floor. He had no umbrella, no suitcase, no designer trench coat. He was just an ordinary man stepping out of the storm with no hint of extravagance. Trailing behind him, Lana was the first to notice him. She hesitated just a second, then quickly wiped her hands and walked over. Her voice didn't carry its usual warmth. "Excuse me, do you have a reservation, sir?" The man gave a slight nod. His voice was hoarse but clear. "No, I was hoping to have a quiet dinner if there's a table free." Lana glanced at the reservation book. Of course there were no reservations at all, still she kept a professional expression, quickly glancing down at his worn shoes mud-stained at the soles. "We do have a few tables, but service may be limited. We're nearing closing time. I hope you understand." The man didn't complain. He simply smiled, a quiet smile. "I understand. Something simple would be more than enough." Lana sighed inwardly and motioned for him to follow her. She led him to a small table by the window. Table 9, a place no one liked to sit when it rained heavily. A strong gust could send droplets splashing at the guest's feet. She set the menu down without looking too closely into his eyes. Her mind whispered, "Probably just a lost tourist. Hopefully he eats fast so I can clean up and go home." What she didn't know was that this man, Elias, was not lost at all, and his visit that evening would not only shape the rest of the night, it would change the way Lana saw the world. The wind chimes at the door rang softly like a whisper, tapping on the door of memory. Lana looked up, startled. An older adult was walking in. He was tall, but his back was slightly hunched. His steps were slow and steady, like someone long accustomed to walking against the wind. A dark, weathered fabric cap shaded most of his face, and his rain-soaked coat drooped heavily over shoulders, already bowed by time. His shoes were caked with mud drenched through. The frayed hems of his jeans bore the wear of gravel and stone. With every step he took, droplets of water fell onto Orum's pristine tiled floor, like traces of time itself misplaced in a place built for elegance. Lana paused for a moment. She had never served a guest like this at Orem, not because he looked unpleasant, not because he was impolite, but because he didn't fit, not the unspoken standards this place upheld. No suit, no tie, no luxury cars are parked at the front. Just an older man, a plain soul stepping into a world made for the polished and privileged. He stopped near the entrance, removed his cap, and gave a small nod. His salt and pepper hair fell messily across his forehead, soaked and dripping. His eyes were deep and warm, not shy but not confident either. There was something about him that felt familiar, and yet something that made you want to step back. "Excuse me," he said softly, "I know it's late, but might I have a simple dinner?" His voice was low, slightly raspy, the kind of voice that had once spoken a lot but had learned to say less. Lana swallowed. She stepped forward slightly, bowing out of habit. Do you have a reservation, sir?" "No," he replied, smiling gently. "I was just passing by. I saw the lights and hoped you might still be open." Lana glanced at the reservation log. Of course it was empty. Her mind went straight to the policy. No walk-ins after 9 p.m. But the clock read 8:48. There was still time if she wanted to make an exception. She looked down at his muddy shoes, no doubt dirt from the steep, slippery slope outside. Then to his coat, no label, no branding soaked through. His hands were rough and veined, and his fingernails were still holding on to grains of seaside sand. She hesitated. In her mind, her manager's voice echoed from training. "Always smile, but know which guests deserve it." And this man? He didn't look like someone worthy of royal service, as the sign above the entrance proudly declared. Lana forced a polite tone. "We do have a few available tables, but the kitchen's winding down. Only a few simple dishes left. I hope that's all right." "That's perfectly fine," the man, Elias replied with a soft smile. "Some soup and bread would warm me up just fine." His answer caught Lana slightly off guard, not because it was too casual, but because it was so honest, so humbly human. She nodded, doing her best to mask the ripple of shame rising quietly in her chest. "Please follow me." She guided him past the grand, empty tables, ones draped in crisp white linens that nearly touched the polished floor. But instead of offering a seat by the panoramic windows or under the chandelier's golden glow, she stopped at a small table near the emergency exit. A heavy curtain beside it shivered slightly with the wind. The lighting was dimmer here close to the kitchen, where clinks of pots and pans and quiet staff conversations could sometimes be heard. "You can sit here, it's fairly quiet," she said. Elias gave no objection. He simply nodded, pulled out the chair and sat down. He placed his cap gently on his lap and rubbed his hands together for warmth. Lana handed him a menu but hesitated. He'd already said what he wanted. Giving him a full French menu with extravagant names and unreachable prices felt cruel, like asking a hungry man to stare at a feast he couldn't touch. She closed the menu and set it aside gently. "I'll bring you the chestnut cream soup. It's light and easy on the stomach. If you'd like something else later, just let me know." Elias smiled, a soft, genuine smile. "Thank you, young lady. On a cold, rainy day like this, I suppose a little warm chestnut might help me remember." He didn't finish the sentence, but Lana could clearly see the way his gaze drifted toward the window, where rain streaked down the glass like long threads of memory, unraveling in silence. As she turned to walk away and place the order, something caught in her chest. She couldn't quite name the feeling. It wasn't guilt, it wasn't pity either. It was something quieter, more delicate. A kind of confusion is born from standing before something you don't fully understand, only knowing it matters. Behind her, Elias remained seated. He didn't glance at the menu, didn't look around the room. He simply sat still, thoughtful, as if this place wasn't new to him at all, as if he had been waiting for this very table, this very moment. Not for the food, not for the ambiance, but for something deeper. A presence, a memory, a quiet belief. Lana, still holding the menu, walked slowly across the empty dining hall. The golden lights overhead cast a warm glow across the polished stone floor, where every footstep echoed just a little louder in the stillness. Outside, the wind whistled faintly. A few raindrops had snuck in through the edge of the window, near table 9 falling to the floor, and leaving faint glistening marks like quiet reminders that the world outside hadn't stopped. That table was far from the best seat in Orem, But Lana had led Elias there not because it was the only option, but because she assumed he wouldn't care. "Please have a seat, sir," she said, trying to keep her tone neutral. Elias nodded without a hint of complaint. He gently removed his soaked coat and hung it over the back of the chair. His movements were calm and deliberate, unbothered by the draft, slipping through the curtain or the cold rain trickling down the glass beside him. At the reception counter, a few remaining staff clustered together in quiet conversation. Their eyes darted toward Elias, then quickly away, stifling soft giggles. "Bet you $5. He orders the cheapest thing on the menu," whispered the blonde girl. "Nah, I bet he just asked for tap water," added another, prompting. More muffled laughter, like teenagers gossiping behind a teacher's back. Lana heard it all, but she stayed silent. Part of her wanted to speak up. Another part quietly admitted, "Honestly, I was thinking the same thing." She approached the table, set the menu down before Elias, and asked with her usual politeness, but not quite the warmth she gave to others, "Have you decided what you'd like to order, sir?" Elias folded his hands together. His pale gray eyes held a distant, thoughtful light. He looked up at her, then smiled gently. And with a calm, steady voice, he said, "I'll have the roasted cod." And he paused, glancing toward the wine list on the wall. A glass of red wine, the Chateau Vivienne 2007. In that instant, it was as if time paused. Lana blinked. Chateau Vivienne 2007. She knew it well. It wasn't a wine you ordered casually. It was one of the finest vintages Orem still had in stock, a single glass costing more than most full meals. She nearly asked him to confirm. Was he sure? But then she met Elias's eyes again, calm, unwavering, not the least bit uncertain, so she simply nodded. "Of course, sir. Please give me a moment," as she turned and walked away. Her heart was still caught, somewhere between disbelief and awe. Not just because of what he ordered, but because of the way he did it. There was no arrogance, no anxiety, no fear of judgment. It was simple, natural. As if he were ordering nothing more unusual than a cup of tea. As if dignity could sit quietly beside him like an old friend. At the order screen, Lana keyed in the dish and wine. She could feel her colleagues' eyes on her. She didn't need to turn around to know they were watching, whispering, waiting for the punchline to play out. And yet somewhere inside her, something had shifted. Why would a man who looked like that, soaked, weathered, and seemingly out of place, order such a dish with such calm certainty? Why didn't he flinch under their stares? And for the first time that evening, Lana began to wonder. Maybe he wasn't the one who didn't belong. Maybe the room just didn't understand him yet. Why was it that with just a few gentle words, he made her feel as though she was the one being tested? Lana blinked, trying to shake off the thought. "Just do your job," she told herself. But deep down, she knew tonight was not going to be like any other shift. In the open kitchen behind her, the head chef raised an eyebrow as he read the order ticket. "Roasted cod and Chateau Vivienne?" he asked, surprised. "Yes, table 9, Lana replied, trying to conceal her hesitation. The chef simply shrugged and began preparing the dish. Meanwhile, Lana returned to Elias's table with the order pad still in her hand. The rain outside tapped steadily against the glass windows, but inside another kind of rain was beginning to fall, one made of silent assumptions of quiet prejudice, and the only one not seeking shelter was the older man sitting there with a serene smile. The main course was ready. Lana took a deep breath as she looked at the plate of roasted cod, elegantly plated, resting on a silver tray. The scent of garlic butter and fresh dill drifted upward, soft and warm, like a wordless melody. Beside it stood a glass of deep crimson wine, Chateau Vivienne 2007, the kind of vintage even regulars hesitated to order. She walked slowly toward table 9. Elias was still there, quietly watching the rain slide down the windowpane. He didn't check his phone. He didn't drum his fingers in impatience. He didn't even glance at the clock, though it had been quite a wait. Lana felt something soften inside her. She paused, adjusted her apron, and gently set the tray down. But just as she reached to place the wine glass, her fingers slipped. There was a soft clink, almost too quiet to notice, but her heart sank. A small stream of water spilled from the carafe, spreading across the tablecloth and soaking into the fabric right in front of Elias. For a moment, Lana froze. She opened her mouth to apologize, but Elias lifted his hand before she could speak. He didn't scold me. He didn't frown. Instead, he calmly picked up his napkin, folded it in half, and began to dab at the water with the kind of patience someone might have wiping down their kitchen table. Then he looked up at her, his eyes smiling gently. It's all right, my dear. Sometimes the smallest mistakes are what teach us patience. Lana stood there speechless, both hands still gripping the water carafe. Her gaze met his, and in his eyes there was no judgment, only understanding. A kind of deep, quiet understanding that was somehow both gentle and overwhelming. Like he had lived through things that made a spilled glass of water feel like nothing at all. Before she could speak, the restaurant door opened suddenly. A gust of cold wind rushed in, carrying the scent of rain and ocean salt. A woman stepped inside, elegant in a chestnut-colored dress, her hair neatly pinned, her eyes sharp and focused. It was Mrs. Tom, the new manager and current owner of Orem. She scanned the nearly empty dining room until her eyes landed on Elias. And in that instant, her expression lit up in surprise, Uncle Elias. Her voice was a mix of astonishment, joy, and unmistakable respect. Lana turned quickly, thinking she'd misheard. I had no idea you were coming tonight, Mrs. Tam continued, walking toward him with a warm smile. Elias rose slowly from his seat, nodding gently. That same peaceful smile still rested on his face. You know me. I've always liked surprises. They embraced lightly, like a family, reuniting after a long time. Lana stood frozen in place. She heard every word but couldn't quite put the pieces together. Then Mrs. Tom turned toward her and explained softly, This is Uncle Elias, the man who founded Orem 15 years ago, back when it was just a small hillside eatery. Mrs. Tom looked at Elias, her voice filled with emotion. If it weren't for you, Orem would have never become one of the finest restaurants on the coast. Lana's eyes widened. She instinctively took half a step back, as if needing physical distance to process the weight of what she'd just heard, as if punishing herself for not recognizing someone so important. You still visit like this? Quietly unannounced, Tam asked, half teasing, half reproachful. Elias gave a soft nod. I wanted to see if the place I once built still carries the spirit it began with. People can repaint walls, change furniture, rewrite the menu. But the way we treat people, that's what defines the soul of a restaurant. He wasn't looking at anyone in particular when he said it yet. Lana felt every word fall into her chest like raindrops landing on stone. She didn't know where to look. Somewhere deep inside, a slow, quiet shame began to take root. Not because he had scolded her, he hadn't. But his gentleness, his patience, and his dignity exposed how shallow her assumptions had been. She remembered guiding him to that seat by the window. She remembered glancing at his muddy shoes and thinking, please don't cause trouble. And now the very man she had silently dismissed was the one who had brought all this beauty into existence. Elias returned to his seat and lifted his wineglass for a small sip. The Vivian still holds that soft bitterness in the finish, but perhaps what lingers more is the way the young woman brought it to me. Lana couldn't respond. All she could do was bow her head deeply. I'm sorry, Mr. Elias, I didn't know. Elias shook his head gently and placed a hand over his chest in a calming gesture. You don't need to know who I am to be kind. What matters isn't a name card or net worth. It's in your eyes, in the way you pour water. In the table you choose a stranger. That night, Lana hadn't simply served a guest. She had received a lesson, but no uniform, no training manual, and no etiquette book had ever taught her. A restaurant may lose its glamour, change its name, or even change hands. But the spirit it was built upon, the respect for every human being who walks through its doors, is what must be preserved. And Elias, through a quiet meal on a rainy night, reminded them of that truth without ever raising his voice. Lana stood in silence beside table 9, her hands clasped, her gaze lowered, unable to meet the soft yellow light that filled the room. The giggles from the service counter had faded. No one said a word. The entire restaurant fell into stillness. A soft breeze crept in through the window pane, carrying with it the scent of rain and sea salt. It also carried away the unconscious confidence Lana had always worn during her shifts, leaving behind something heavier, something humbler. She looked up, her voice trembling. I'm sorry I treated you unfairly. I only saw you through the lens of judgment. Elias sat there, still composed, as if nothing all evening had disturbed his peace. He looked at Lana not with judgment, but with the eyes of someone who understood that mistakes were part of being human, and that growing up is what we choose to do after them. He gently placed the wineglass back down, folded his napkin, and spoke slowly. My dear, good service isn't when a man in a suit walks in and gets his wine poured just right. He paused, his gaze resting on her, not cold, not stern, but deep enough to hold a mirror to her heart. It's when a man in simple clothes walking in from the rain enters a place like this and is still welcomed with the same dignity as anyone else. Lana bit her lip. A single hot tear rolled down her cheek before she could wipe it away. Elias continued, his voice as light as the wind. A truly elegant restaurant isn't defined by its menu prices, but by the hearts of the people who serve within it. No lecture, no condemnation, just a reminder, gentle and timely, like sunlight breaking through a heavy cloud, the kind you cannot ignore. Lana nodded slowly but firmly. I'll remember that, not just for tonight, but for every day that follows. Elias smiled, a smile so warm it seemed to brighten the room just a little, even as the rain continued to fall outside. Dinner ended without a final bell. No clinking of glasses, no celebratory cheer, like the usual special occasions at Orem. Only the soft murmur of rain falling on the terrace, in a strange reverent stillness, as if the entire space was holding its breath, trying to preserve something sacred. Elias gently placed his napkin on the plate. He stood slowly, slipping on his coat, now only slightly damp, just as calmly and quietly as he had entered. No rush, no flare, simply enough, fully present. Lana stood beside him, hands clasped before her, eyes fixed on the man who had somehow changed her from the inside out. In just one evening, Elias reached into the inner pocket of his coat and pulled out a small, bronze-colored card. No name, no number, no bank logo, only a single embossed symbol, a simple circle with the word Aurum stylized across it like a sun rising behind a mountain ridge. The cashier hesitated for a split second when he saw it. An internal card, the young man murmured, nodding in understanding, then quietly completed the transaction. Without another word, Elias turned to Lana. He didn't offer flowery goodbyes. I just placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, firm enough to communicate trust without needing to speak. Thank you for listening. Then he stepped out of the restaurant, leaving behind the warm golden lights, the faint chime of glassware, and a young woman standing motionless in the quiet room. Lana watched his figure fade into the rain-soaked night. The glass door closed slowly behind him, reflecting her face blurred by tears. Tears not from shame, but from the realization that she had learned something greater than technique or training. She had learned what it meant to be human. Monday morning. The atmosphere in Orem's staff room was different. Servers, chefs, valet staff, and even receptionists had all been invited to a special short meeting. Tumthe restaurant's owner walked in with a serious, though not harsh expression. Today we have a proposal from someone I believe we all need to listen to. Heads turned. Lana stepped in, holding a small folder in her hands. Her hair was neatly tied back, and her usual warm gaze now held a quiet conviction. She stood before her colleagues, some of whom had once whispered beside her, joked with her, behind the bar, placed light-hearted bets with her, and now she was the one beginning with an open apology. I'm not here to talk about my mistake. I'm here to share an opportunity. One evening I learned that sometimes the person we underestimate most is the one who teaches us the biggest lesson. She opened her folder and presented her proposal, a full retraining program for all staff focused on the art of serving without judgment. Not just how to carry trays or describe menu items, but how to see people clearly, regardless of what they wear, where they sit, or how much they spend. No one laughed, no one rolled their eyes. Mrs. Tom stood up and began to applaud quietly at first. Then slowly every person in the room joined in. At that moment, Lana was no longer just a 23-year-old newcomer. She had become the person who reignited the original spirit of Orem, the very spirit Elias once described. The true value of a restaurant lies in how it treats its people. A week later, Lana was officially appointed to a brand new role, Head of Guest Experience, a title that had never existed on Orem's org chart. She wasn't the most skilled, she wasn't the most senior, but she was the one who dared to reflect, to change, and to lead others towards something better. She began organizing small training sessions, sharing real stories, holding open discussions on empathy, and even teaching how to look into someone's eyes and understand what isn't being said. And sometimes she would repeat a single line, "We don't serve food, we serve people." On another rainy afternoon, the sea-town was soaked again. Lana sat by the window, table 9, the very same seat from that night, scribbling down a few notes for her next session. She paused, looking up at the door. No one walked in, but something inside her stirred a familiar warmth, and she smiled, a calm, quiet smile. Not because she was waiting for Elias to return, but because ever since that night, every guest who stepped through Orum's door could be Elias, whether old or young, wet from the rain or arriving in a luxury car. And she would always remember the most important lesson she ever learned wasn't written on a menu or printed on a staff badge. It lived in the ways she looked at others. Respect needs no reason. Kindness requires no title. That story may have ended, but its message is still beginning in the heart of every server, every guest, and perhaps even in you reading this now.